What's up guys, my name is Kevin. I'm a DP out of Orange County, California, and today I'm going over the three main rig builds I use most with my Canon C200. A lot of the parts I used are universal and can be used on almost any rig. I've added all the parts down below in the description. Now the first build is the run and gun build, and this is the one that is very stripped down, very minimal, so there's not a lot to it, but it's for when you really need to pack light, you don't know what to expect when you show up, which happens more often than I'd like. Great for event work, dock work, usually like a fast-paced environment, maybe if you shoot weddings or something where you need to pack light and get a lot of coverage quickly and discreetly. It's small but mighty, but it's built for speed. Okay, let's get right into it. The top plate is pretty straightforward. It basically adds a ton of quarter 20 mounting points for accessories. Next is the NATO rail for the top handle, which is a little flatter than the standard NATO rail. Just saves you a few more millimeters on the overall height of your rig. Now we add a NATO top handle, quick and easy to connect and disconnect. And then we have the monitor arm. I typically remove the big arm that comes with the C200 and just use the articulating portion of the monitor arm. And I mount that to the front of the SMALLRIG plate. I find that the standard one kind of screams, I'm a camera. It looks like a T-bar that just has so much, it takes up so much space, and I like to remove that and get it real compact and close to the body of the camera. For audio, I use the Rode Video MICPRO, and instead of attaching it onto the top handle, which I can easily do, instead I add a cold shoe to the side of the top plate, but positioning it here just keeps it a little bit more tucked into the body. Usually I pack an extra Canon battery that I keep with me to switch out. The lens I use on most run and gun is the Canon 17-55 f2.8. This is my go-to run and gun lens when I'm running this build. It's not the best build quality, but it's sharp. It has IS, it has f2.8, and covers so much ground with that 17-55 focal range. The next build is the shoulder rig. The shoulder rig is for when I need to run and gun, but I know it'll be for a full day or a longer period of time. Maybe I'm shooting a whole day of interviews and B-roll. I need to be able to switch from shoulder to sticks frequently. The versatility of this build is what gives me everything I need in a full day of shooting without having to worry about running out of power or forearm fatigue, changing the rig mid-shoot kind of thing. Now to start, I use the VCT shoulder plate, and it allows me to easily mount my camera on top of it using just a standard 501 slide-in plate. And I secure that to the VCT base plate, which connects to the tripod. That allows me to quickly take the camera off my shoulder and put it on the tripod if I'm doing an interview, and that takes seconds. I add a couple carbon fiber rods to the front, and then I add a 15mm rod clamp, and then on that I add two DOGBONE arms. On the left side, I had a friend of mine made a custom wooden sphere for the left grip. On the right side, I connect the Canon grip, and I use a relocator cable from Shape, so I can easily control the camera and change any settings all with that right grip. Same top plate and the same NATO rail. On the top plate, I add a 15mm dual rail block, and then I add rails to the top. The shoulder plate does come with real rail mounts, but you'll see why I add these to the top of the camera instead in a minute. From there, I add an INDIPRO battery plate to the top back side of the rails, and then I connect the core micro V-mount batteries to power. I can easily just pull that battery plate up and out of the way to access any of the controls on the rear side of the camera. And I typically keep the stock battery inside the camera so I can hot swap if I'm doing longer takes. For monitoring, I use the ZACUTO Z Finder, and I mount that to the ZACUTO Access Mini. I can position this anywhere I want, and if I need to get lower angles, I can easily just flip up that eyepiece to monitor that lower angle. And it also acts as a sun hood in this orientation, so that's an added benefit. For audio, I use an NTG4 Plus just to get a little bit better audio. I'll usually use the Canon shock mount on the side of the camera and connect an XLR to the camera body. Sometimes I put a dead cat on there if it's windy and I'm outside. Because I mounted the rails to the top, I'm now able to quickly remove the camera from the VCT plate without taking the whole front half section. I usually do this if I need to get in like a tighter spot, or there's a weird angle I'm trying to get where I'm not trying to lift my entire shoulder rig to make the shot work. I use a ton of different lenses during the shoots, but usually if I'm trying to have one lens and I can only pick one, I'll throw a 24-105 f4 on it. I'm not too worried about the f4 f-stop because on these shoots there's typically a little more planning involved, where there's either lighting, and it's not really like the run and gun build where you don't really know what to expect. This is kind of planned out where you're shooting interviews, you have a couple things with you have time, you did some pre-production, and you just want to get great shots. Alright, this is the last build, and I call this build the Easy Rig build. And it's probably one of my favorites. It's probably the one I go to most often and find myself using most often. I either use it in the studio or when I'm doing long shoots and I need a, organic handheld look. I'm able to securely mount and carry the weight of all the accessories I need for the day without any arm or shoulder fatigue. It allows, all the weight to be redistributed to your hips, and I really can go all day without destroying my back. So let's get into this build. We use the same top plate, same NATO rail, same 15mm dual rail block, and the rails, battery plates all the same. I switched out the handle for one that doesn't have a 15mm rail slot. I don't need it for this one because I won't be mounting anything there. But I love this one because it has a little sneaky, cheeky little hidden tool that I find myself using all the time when I forget, my regular tools on the shoot. To monitor, I use a SMALLRIG 702 Bright. I love the big 7-inch screen. And with the pan and tilt mount that I have connected to it, I'm able to turn it any which way to get any sort of viewing angle, whether I'm up high or whether I'm down low. And I mount that to the top of the top handle. From there I add a TERABEK bolt using a 15mm rail block and cold shoe, and I use this for client monitoring or focus pulling. Sometimes I like to mount the stock monitor on the other side of the camera using a smaller 15mm rod clamp for like an AC or someone. I mount it to the top rail where it's tucked in but can still be adjusted using the articulating arm. Now to power all these accessories, instead of using a bunch of separate batteries that just adds to the weight unnecessarily of the rig, I power everything through a D-tap splitter. And these things are awesome because they're small and they essentially just split the one D-tap that you have on your V-mount battery or the V-mount plate into 4 additional D-tap ports. And I Velcro that and I hide it on the back of the battery plate so it's out of the way and you can't accidentally pull the power to anything. Now in order to keep all these cables from going crazy and having like a noodle fest on your camera, I use little Velcro cable ties to keep everything nice and tidy and out of the way. Lastly, I chuck a matte box on there for different filters and to block the sun, but let's be honest, it's really just a flex. Alright, you've been rigged. That's the 3 main builds that I use most, and I hope that helps you. Thanks for watching. Feel free to comment below any questions you might have. If you want to see more behind the scenes and production breakdowns, I have a ton of great content on my Instagram at Kevin Reyes. And if you're ever in Southern California and need to rent some gear, make sure to check out my ShareGrid page where I have a ton of gear for rent and available for your production. If you like, subscribe, and mention this video when you're booking your rental, I'll hook it up with 15% off on your first rental. And I will see you next time. Rig on and rig out. Riggedy. Rig James? Riggeroni. Honey bunches of rig. Baby back ribs. I'm hungry.